5,000 pesos a month. That's all we started with when we began our investment journey. If you think about it, that's really just an iPhone installment plan. But that 5,000 pesos a month over the span of 9 years has now grown to 1.3 million pesos. That's not savings, that's separate from our emergency fund. That's only the investment portfolio. And if you can start investing 5,000 pesos a month today, then I hope that this video inspires you, because I'm going to break down how we started with this investment and how it helped us to build the wealth that we have today. Let's get into the slides. Just a little disclaimer before I start. I am not a licensed financial planner. I'm just a dude showing his numbers in hopes of educating Filipinos and inspiring them to start their own financial independence journey. So, a little background as to who I am. Who is Patrick Mabilog? So again, I'm Patrick Mabilog. My friends call me Kiko. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an investor. I'm also a Lord of the Rings fan. I got married at 22 years old and racked up a 6-figure debt at the age of 23. Got into debt again at 25, but eventually built an 8-figure business from scratch with my wife Ces, who's also my business partner. And over that time, we've also built an investment portfolio of about 10 million pesos across several investment vehicles, including Philippine stocks, bonds, global funds, real estate, and the like. And I'm going to show you today one of those investment portfolios. But all of this started when we came across this book. Years after we started our financial independence journey, I finally read The Psychology of Money. And I had this uncomfortable realization. Some of what we did in the beginning when we started investing was smart. Some of it was luck. And one thing that we almost did almost cost us everything that we built. So if you've been watching this channel thinking that you need to be a millionaire to invest, then I hope to break that myth in this video. So a little backstory, we started with absolutely nothing when my wife and I got married at the age of 22. No rich parents. In 2016, we were renting a 1-bedroom apartment and I was working in full-time ministry. My wife was working for Globe Telecom. She was working a corporate job. And we were your typical middle-class family in the Philippines. We had some disposable income and we were just getting out of our second debt. And then I found this guy on YouTube. His name is Marvin Germo. He taught about stock investments and I really liked watching his videos. And one time I was watching one of his YouTube videos and he talked about peso cost averaging, meaning that you put aside a certain amount of your income to invest every single month. And he gave an example of 10%. So at that time, we were earning about 50,000 pesos. So we could invest about 5,000. And the recommended platform during that time was Call Financial. So I asked for my wife's permission if we could start investing that money. And we quickly learned how important it was to invest. So when we started, we began with investing 5,000 pesos a month, which in peso cost averaging terms, that's kind of like just putting your money into a savings, but instead of putting it into a bank account, you're putting it into investments. And we invested religiously for 9 years, and we followed some steps. We built up more investment, and we kept our lifestyle down. We chose to stay in the province, and eventually we even moved to a cheaper city. After about 9 years, that 5,000 pesos per month investment would ultimately turn into somewhere close to 1.3 million pesos. And just a quick disclaimer, this did not happen overnight. It took 9 years of investing and constant pushing with the power of compound interest. And if you're looking for a get-rich-quick investment program, this is not the video for you. So if that's what you're looking for, then might as well just click out. But what I want to share with you is 3 phases that happened over those 9 years that helped us to steadily and more sustainably build our portfolio. So this investment journey with the 3 phases, I'll walk through them one by one and I'll show you the real numbers because this is the part that nobody really shows you. So what are the 3 phases? The first phase is the exercise phase. Exercise what? I'll explain a little bit. And then the exploration phase, that's phase 2. And then the last phase is expansion. I'm going to show the actual numbers, not the retirement number, not the big number that I showed in the other video, which is going to be linked in the description below if you want to look at how we're going to get that into like an actual retirement number. But this is the starting number, how we began. It took us 9 years to build meaningful wealth that is now setting us up for a promising life. And if you see the math, then you'll see how it's gonna click. No, and yeah, let's dive into the first phase. So the first phase is the exercise phase, where you want to build discipline first, not returns. Again, we started back in 2016, and when I asked my wife if we could try the platform that we now we used during that time, we still have it today, called Financial. We wanted to wait for the right time to invest, but then mentors told us, and as I continue to educate myself about investing and preparing for retirement, the one thing that really jumped out for me is that a lot of people were saying that you're never gonna have the right time to invest. And so we decided not to wait. And so if you look at the time that we actually started investing, we actually invested in a very bad time, because the Philippine Stock Exchange was on a downfall. It started at about 9,000, that it was trading at 9,000 when we started, and it went down to 7,000. But the game here essentially, and what really helped us, was to build the consistency. Consistency was the entire strategy at this stage, because we wanted to build the discipline first, not the returns. Let me show you some actual numbers when we started. So we invested again 5,000 pesos per month for 2 years. So the total contribution was about 120K. And when I looked at the average returns that we were getting from our investments, we had about 7% per annum growth in our investments. We got some really good bets. Some of them were really bad as well. But it kind of like averaged out to 7% every year. By the way, if you want to compute your own numbers and come up with your own computation of what your investments could be based on your investment budget, then I've actually added into the description below the tracker that I've used to come up with my numbers. And so if you want to use that and come up with your own computations for your context as well, then that's available for you to download anytime you want to. And so that gave us a growth of about 9,000 pesos. 9,154 to be exact. And so for 120K, it now became 129,154. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot of money. And that's because when we think and when we start investing, that the money is the hardest part. But it's actually not. It's the psychology. What we wanted to do here, and now in retrospect, when we look back, one thing that really helped us when we were at this phase is we learned how to deal with the fears of investing. Fear of the investment going down and then pulling out because we're panic mode. We learned how not to be greedy and not be overconfident over some of the investments that we were making. We learned how to do our research, to kind of like check first and vet the investments that we were putting our money in. But we also, at the same time, we're starting to learn how to practice delayed gratification. And we learned how to put our future before anything. And again, that sounds like something that anyone and everyone will say. It even sounds corny, but it's different to say something, and it's also different to practice something. When you're practicing delayed gratification, when you now see that okay, there's a upgrade here where we can put, where there's you see all of your friends going to vacation in Boracay, but you have to set aside money not just for your travel fund, but you also need to put more money into your investments. That's when we started to learn the importance of the discipline of investing. And it might sound very cheesy, but I don't think that we would have gotten to the point that we are in today if we didn't embrace the discipline of the building phase. And many times, this is the part that is both silent and boring. No one sees it. It's not flashy. There is definitely days where you question whether you should go forward with this, because you're having to say no to a lot of the comforts and the joys of life. We bought a second-hand car. We did not buy brand new. My phone was always a hand-me-down from my wife when she would get her loyalty from her postpaid plan. So for many years, for a decade, my phone was always 2 to 3 models down. But it worked fine. And when we would eat out, we would do our very best to make sure that we would eat out on a budget. That budget would be anywhere between 1,500 to 2,500 for the entire week. So if we eat out twice, then we have to divide that budget to those, those 2 times that we're gonna go out as a family. And because we built that habit over time, we eventually got to the second phase, which was the exploration phase. What is this phase? This is the phase where you start trying new investments. In 2016, we were also able to buy our first house. And eventually, we decided to transfer from Iloilo City to Bacolod in 2019. And when we decided to make that transfer, we kept the house that we purchased. And eventually, we said, why don't we rent out this property? When we rented it out, we were netting about 10,000 pesos per month if we remove the mortgage and the amount that we were paying a property manager to help us run errands in Iloilo City while we were in Bacolod. And when we made that decision, that rental income went straight to investments. A lot of people were saying, oh, you now have a lot of money. You can travel more. You can buy more stuff. Kiko, you can finally start buying branded things, which I did not do because we decided that all of that money we would start putting into more investments. And so we diversified more. We put in some money into mutual funds, into UITFs, into feeder funds, which is the time that we started to experience the global market. And we traded a feeder fund in BPI Wealth Builder that would trade the S&P 500. And that was our first exposure to global investing. We also invested into cryptocurrency and NFTs. I bought a lot of NFTs, and those have practically little to zero value now. One of the bad bets that I made, but you learn from it, right? So in this phase, we had built up our investment to about 10,000 pesos per month. So during this phase, we still had the phase 1 growth. We did not touch that money. And so that 129,000 pesos over a span of the 8 years that we started to build this investment, we continued to put in more money, the 10,000 pesos a month. And from the 210,000 pesos, we now had an additional fund of about 1,000,000 pesos that came from the additional 10,000 per month that we were putting in. And so the total gain that we now had from our investments was about 336,810 pesos for a total value of 1,296,810 pesos, close to 1.3 million. Now, combining phase 1 portfolio growing, combining phase 1 portfolio growing with the phase 2 portfolio growth that we had, reaching 1.3 million pesos, I realized that 80% of our wealth came from phase 2. But that only came because we built the discipline in phase 1. We think, once again, that investing, it's about numbers. But it's actually more about emotions and dealing with the psychology once again. You're not going to invest 10,000 pesos a month if you can't start with 5,000. And you can't start with 5,000 if you don't start with 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. So it's the little that you start with that helps you to prepare yourself as an investor. That's the big unlock. It's not about how much money you put in. It's about how you're working on yourself. Keeping your costs down, finding more avenues to grow active income, delayed gratification, so that you can invest more. And so that's also when we realized the real power in making money was when you use your income to make income. And I reference back to that example where when we rented out our property, we could have easily just put that into our operational costs and increased our lifestyle a little bit, buy a better car, put in more money in shopping, put in more travel. We still had those comforts from time to time, but we always made sure that the rental property income would always go into our investment basket. We didn't put it in our operational costs. We chose to keep it separate. So we continued to earn active income from our business while we used the money from our assets to make more money. And that's when you start to realize that you can use money to now create more money and then transition to the third phase. Because by this point, we now had something that we didn't have in 2016. We had 1.3 million pesos. And that 1.3 million pesos now gave us options. And so now comes in phase 3, which is now expansion. Expanding your investment horizon. So we took the accumulated portfolio and we started to spread it across different positions. Number one is we bought a second rental property, which is video for another day. But the other position that we put in is we deployed our most recent investment unlock, which is the 1 million pesos investment that we have in Singapore. And I talked about this investment in a separate video. I'm going to link it in the description below. I don't know if I can put cards yet, but if I can, then it's probably going to be up here somewhere. But in phase 1, we were learning. In phase 2, we were earning. In phase 3, we were now multiplying. And we deployed our investments into the Singapore investment that has been built over the last 9 years of behavior that never wavered. So again, I talk about that video a little bit more, where that 1 million pesos in the next 30 years of compounding can grow into 20 million pesos if all goes well. Now, all of that to say, over the last couple of years, we've built this income stack that's going to provide us with about 250,000 per month in passive income with all of the computations. We've run the numbers with our wealth manager. We've checked time, like over the long period of time, the past couple of months, we've been double checking this. We've been just really confirming this. And of course, these are just projections. These could change over time, but this is what we're currently shooting for. And with the help of mentors and financial advisors that we've employed to help us to grow our wealth, this is now literally money while we sleep. Now we're actually getting about 40% of that number now, and we're just allowing it to compound over time. Now, let me close up with this one point that I want to share. We started with 120,000 contributed, 5,000 pesos a month for 2 years, and we gained 9,000 pesos. That's phase 1. That's the part that looks embarrassing on paper, but that's also the part that made everything else possible. And the question was never whether 5,000 was enough money. The question was whether we were going to become the kind of people who invest. And we answered that in phase 1. And from that point in 2016, these, two young, dumb, broke, people, married couple. Now, this is the other picture, the second picture on the right. This is our picture with our wealth manager, Rico, who is based in Singapore. He works with SG Alliance. He handles like a big chunk of our investments. All of that happened because we built the foundation early on. So the principle that I really want you to take home from this video is this. From The Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel wrote that wealth is what you don't see. Phase 1 is invisible when you're exercising, when you're building that discipline. And so was phase 2 actually, in many respects. But phase 3 is what people see now. And they think that that's where we started. And so they say, oh, you're so lucky because you're already rich. We were not rich. We started with nothing. And for so many years, like the first half of our marriage, we were middle class at best, earning no more than 50,000 pesos a month. But when you look back at our life, was it smarts or was it luck? It was a little bit of both, because the luck was starting, but the smarts was staying. And in Psychology of Money, again, it did not teach us how to invest, but it confirmed what we were already doing all of this time. And that the whole game really it wasn't about the money. Money was never the point. The amount was never the point. It was the identity that we were building in that early phase. If you've been telling yourself that you'll start investing when you earn more, that's when you become an investor, I want you to hear this. That 5,000 with the right behavior will always beat 50,000 with the wrong one. Always. And so, if you're here and you're saying, I can't start because I don't really have a lot, start with the little that you have. I want to hear in the comment section below. What's the real starting number for you right now? Is it 5,000 pesos? Is it 3,000? Is it 1,000? Is it 500 pesos? Not the number that you wish it was. What is the starting point? And I challenge you right now, start with that number, because you'll never know where that number can take you. Because if you build the foundation and you build the identity of an investor, then eventually when the money comes, you will have that foundation. Your behavior, your discipline will allow you to deploy more income, will teach you to do your own research, to expose yourself to new investments, to new markets, to learn from other mentors, to not to shoot down and say, oh, that investment isn't going to work. No, it's going to teach you to go and say, this is the possibility. Now, of course, quick disclaimer, be careful about where you invest. So don't just go and say, oh, this investment is going to give me 500% return. That's probably a scam. And I'll probably talk about that in another video. But if hopefully that this has helped you to really see that even in your smallest and earliest phases, if you're faithful with the little, then eventually it could become the starting point of a life built with generational wealth. If this is the kind of content that you want more of, I hope that you subscribe, follow our journey. This is the first of many honest look backs that we're gonna do. And if this brought you value, and if you know a friend that could really benefit from this, then feel free to share it with them. I have no upsells. I'm not selling anything. I cannot offer you investments because I'm not licensed. I really just want to help give more of our story and give you, a glimpse of where we've come from the last 10 years, starting with practically nothing to now being able to build a life of generational wealth so that we can live with a good retirement and pass on wealth to our children in the future. And as you continue to follow the journey, I hope that you become inspired. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.